welcome to FO Talks. With me today is Thomas Barfield. He is a world-renowned expert on Afghanistan. He teaches at Boston University. He has traveled all around the country, speaks the local language or speaks the local languages, and is a scholar of great renown. So Thomas, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So Thomas, straight off the bat, what's going on in Afghanistan today? Paint us a picture.
Well, right now we've got an Afghanistan that's in turmoil because for 20 years we had a government that was supported by the United States, by NATO and EU countries, and it had a particular project to build a democracy, to build sort of a modernistic society, to transform Afghanistan. At least that was the hope of its last president, Ghani. At the same time, it was faced by people that were opposed to that mission. Opposed both because they saw it as foreign backed, there were foreign troops in the country, but also because Afghanistan has never agreed, or its people have never agreed, on exactly where it should go. We can see during the 19th century, Afghanistan's rulers were interested in centralizing power, and they were interested in building armies. They were interested in getting control over all the regions of the country. But their goals were largely political. That is, they wanted to exert sovereignty.
Okay.
Amir Abdurrahman
Yes.
effectively went after every group in the country, including his own Pashtuns. He first went to war with them after he suppressed them in eastern Afghanistan. Slavery was widespread at that time. Hazaras were enslaved. They were turned into an oppressed class of people. This was a means to centralize his power. It was a means to show that he was stronger than anyone else. The Hazaras were the worst victims of his policies. But if you look at everything he did, it was all focused on political power. The problem in late 19th century Afghanistan was after the Anglo-Afghan War that ended in 1880, clear whether there would be even an Afghanistan. The British had decided that they would take Kandahar and add it to Baluchistan as part of British India. But politics being what they were in England, the government changed. Parliament decided that the war in Afghanistan was not worth pursuing. They gave Kandahar back to the emir, and they said, if you can take Herat, it's yours. He's successful in that in a very brutal fashion. But in 1919, after the First World War, the Afghans declared independence. Now, they had been autonomous throughout the 19th century. The British withdrew twice after their wars, left Afghanistan autonomous, but they always told the Afghans, we will control your foreign relations. You cannot have foreign relations with other countries. The Afghans remained neutral in the First World War, and their ruler believed that as a gift for that, for not causing trouble along the Indian frontier, that Afghanistan would be granted independence. As with sort of the promises to the Arabs in the Middle East, the British forgot about that promise or claimed it had never been made, and were content with the status quo. The emir that had made that promise, who had not caused anything bad to happen during the war, he was assassinated in 1919, and his son took over. His son, by the name of Amanullah, he was hero of Afghanistan. He was named Ghazi, the victor of a jihad, because he immediately declared war on Great Britain, the Third Anglo-Afghan War, to make Afghanistan independent. The war wasn't all that successful. British pretty much pushed back all the Afghan incursions into the northwest frontier. But in the wake of the First World War, they were exhausted. And the last thing they wanted to do was have more problems with Afghanistan. So they granted the emir his independence. But in 1928, he and Queen Soraya decided that they would take the first trip any Afghan ruler had ever done. They went first to Egypt, and then to Europe, and then they saw Turkey. They drove back. So in 1928, he came back and he announced an even bigger set of reforms. But before these could even be implemented, the country blew up into civil war. And he was forced to abdicate in January of 1929. And the person that replaced him was a Tajik bandit from north of Kabul, a man by the name of Habibullah Kalakani. And he was sort of a cultural populist. He was going to bring back Islam. He was not a cleric. He just simply abolished everything Amanullah did, and sat on the throne for 9 months. Amanullah got so depressed that in May, he left. He decided he would go to Europe, and he left the rebellion in the hands of his former defense minister, Nader Khan, who was somewhat of a rival. And Nader said, yeah, you go to Europe, I'll take care of this, and then you can come back. Nader and his brothers raised troops not in Afghanistan, but in British India. At any rate, this army finally took Kabul in October. His army declared him the new king of Afghanistan. He changed his name to Nader Shah. He executed Kalakani, and there was a new regime. He would rule conservatively. Unfortunately, he murdered one of Amanullah's allies from an important family. One of the retainers of that family assassinated him in 1933. The important thing was he had come into Afghanistan not as an individual, but with a set of brothers. And it was the set of brothers that was ruling the country. So when Nader was assassinated, the brothers immediately put their nephew, Zahir Shah, who was 19 years old, they put him on the throne. That gave continuity. But they retained power for the next 20, 30 years. So behind the scenes. So what we see is that it's largely a family affair. They managed to stabilize Afghanistan. There were now decades of stability in Afghanistan. And so whether or not you consider them usurpers or not, they had brought peace to Afghanistan. And it would be a peace that lasts 50 years. They stayed out of the Second World War. And during the Cold War, they became canny neutrals. They got the United States and the Soviet Union to compete for who could do the most for Afghanistan. This is a modernization, but it's not perceived of as a modernist regime. It is not on their agenda. They're going to make facts happen on the ground. This caused the idea that Afghanistan needed to move forward, led to Daoud, who had been the former prime minister and really one of the most powerful people in the country for many decades, to, after a 10-year experiment with democracy, which Zahir Shah had initiated, Zahir Shah went on vacation and Daoud launched a coup, pretty much bloodless, declared an end to the monarchy and declared himself president of a republic. Now, for most Afghans, however, he was the king's cousin and brother-in-law. It was the same family. So you're moving from Shah to Rais to president. But as far as they were concerned, it was rebranding, not, and if anything, more effective, because Zahir Shah was seen as a feckless ruler and Daoud Khan was seen as a strong man. And the first thing he did was turn on the Islamists, because historically governments in Kabul were brought down by sort of right-wing conservative Islamists from the countryside. So he quickly moved to suppress them. He did it quite effectively. He underestimated, however, the power on the left. Those people had helped him come to power a little bit, but then he had sidelined them. In 1978, there was a large demonstration at a funeral at the death of a Communist Party leader. And suddenly he realized there were many more of these people than he thought. So he moved to arrest all of them, but the arrests were botched. Their leaders in panic called their allies in the military, who fought a tank battle in the center of Kabul between Daoud's forces, and the communist faction won. But it was hardly a revolution, it was a coup.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.